So everybody, welcome to this energy panel put on by the St. Albans City Climate and Energy Committee. I just wanted to welcome you all here. I wanted to thank the library and Director Becky Manahan for hosting us. Round of applause for Becky and the library. And I also wanted to thank Northwest Access TV for recording this panel. It'll be playing on public access television and on YouTube to watch later. So if you have clarifying questions or want to come back and see some of the answers, subscribe to Northwest Access TV on YouTube. After that, I just wanted to go through and thank our panelists for being here. We have Zach Casey from Green Mountain Power. We have Paul Lambert from Efficiency Vermont, and we have Tim Perrin from Vermont Gas Systems. So I just want to thank them and give them a round of applause for applying and helping us out tonight. We have a few rules of the road. If you haven't signed in with the sign-in sheet, please do. You can pick up a ticket number. We'll have a prize drawing later. We have some index cards and pens to fill out those notes. Please do. You've got pizza and drinks all taken care of, so that's great. We also are going to be collecting questions. So we have Jenna and Jim will be helping collect questions for the panelists. You saw some notepads and pens on the table there. So after signing up, or if you've signed up already, feel free to go get some of the paper and pens, write down a question, and flag down Jenna or Jim. They'll collect your questions. We'll gather the questions and we'll ask them of the panelists. So we'll refrain from voice questions. Please use the question notepad cards to submit your questions. That would be awesome. We'll have a small time later for verbal questions, and especially after the event, you're welcome to chat with the panelists one-on-one. So we'll begin, I guess, with a general question. I would ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell the audience a little bit about what you do at each of your organizations. Zach, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it. Thanks for everyone having us here tonight. My name is Zach Casey. I'm on Green Mountain Power's Energy Innovation Team. Wear a lot of hats, but one of them is to be a spearhead for our commercial industrial customers. Do a lot in that space specifically, to kind of act as a concierge to see what their needs are for their power portfolio and specific rates, and then trying to get folks off of fossil fuels onto clean electric energy. That's kind of the main role. I have a team that does that at Green Mountain Power every day, and I help lead that team.
Paul Lambert, Efficiency Vermont, and my role is our utility partnerships. So I work very closely with Zach and Tim on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, because oftentimes together, collectively, we can serve our customers better, be it our residential customers, our nonprofits and municipalities, as well as our commercial industrial customers. And honestly, our worlds have really converged over the last, I'd say, 8 to 10 years, and that the objectives of both Efficiency Vermont as the state's efficiency utility and our regulated supply utilities have really come together in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So there's a suite of services that we have, but there's also services that are available through our partners here. And our work is really to try to make that seamless to the customer. So that's a key part of what I do.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thanks for your interest. I'm Tim Perrin. I lead up our energy management team at Vermont Gas Systems, also known as VGS. Our team's role is really to help customers use less gas, reduce their energy consumption, reduce their energy costs, and greenhouse gas emissions. So we deliver a weatherization program for homes and businesses, equipment rebates for high-efficiency equipment, new construction if you're building a new residential or commercial property, as well as the delivery of heat pumps through our service team. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a kind of a residential energy question up first, and I'll pitch it to all the panelists here, and whoever wants to take it, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll move to you. If a person or family can't afford to do everything at once, there are a lot of energy options out there, energy saving options. What's the best sequence for making home energy improvements? So what's the best way to go about doing that. Thinking big picture, such as structural projects first, followed by insulation, followed by HVAC upgrades, and so on, or is there some other approach?
You kind of nailed it, Zach. Like structural stuff first. Like if there's something wrong, you should be fixing your structural part of your home. It's residential, number one. I say like stop the bleeding per se. Put a Band-Aid on it. Make sure it's structurally sound, and then from there go up and weatherize. You know, a tight home. Either way, through insulation, windows and doors is the best way to keep a tight home, and then go from there into, you know, your heating, cooling, so that way your asset that you're putting into there is doing justice in that home. As you know, every single one of us, these folks here have programs that can help with just about all three of those measures throughout the way.
Is there any particular example of a residential project that's gone through that, first to last, that prioritization of projects? And could you describe a little bit about what that looked like for a homeowner?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, Efficiency Vermont and GMP and Tim, as you will, have programs as well. This weatherization programs specifically, you know, I don't think we do much on the structural side for this side of the business, but for weatherization, there's the weatherization programs in the state that helps folks do that. There's a program called fuel switching, Paul. I don't think it's called Act 44 anymore, or fuel switch that we're
The low-income fuel switch program?
That's an example of how folks can go get their house weatherized, and then they can come to the table, and we offer incentives to help switch that fuel from something maybe like an oil-fired furnace to a heat pump. And then they're off and running.
Thinking about if folks were looking at weatherization, it's one of the, I guess, easier things in some cases to do in a home. Where would folks go to look into making those weatherization improvements specifically?
As far as online resources or resources like that, I think I would go to Efficiency Vermont's page first of all. Want to take that one?
Yeah. Just to actually weave this into the initial question, there's that macro view that you were asking about. Where do I start? And I left some cards up there for virtual home energy visit as a great starting point. So before you reach out to a contractor, it's just to work with one of our staff. And we can take that bird's eye view of the home and see what's happening. And if you've got a tablet or a smartphone or some way that we can walk around the home with you and see some of the things. And, you know, as I was talking with this lady over here, an 1890s farmhouse versus a 1985 raised ranch has some sort of inherent sort of issues that you start with. And the folks who do this work day in and day out know those situations well. So they can take that knowledge that they have into account, along with looking at your home specifically, and have that conversation with you so that you can, as you described, begin to map it out. And I would just add to what Zach mentioned, there's sort of this big picture of weatherizing and doing these higher capital projects, but I would encourage folks to balance that with some lower cost improvements that can be made. You know, the lighting, the appliances are things on controls that can be managed, like a smart thermostat, right, or lighting controls for outside lighting that sometimes get left on. So those are things that don't cost a lot of money, that you can do now as you begin to map out the longer term things. And like Zach mentioned, make sure structurally that home is sound first. And just this month, through some federal funding that we received, there's some home repair work that can be done if that repair work is in prohibiting weatherization to your home. So it's not home repair for the sake of home repair, but if there's roof or moisture or asbestos removal that you can't weatherize that home because of that situation, this is a program that you can take advantage of. And the other thing that I would just add is financing can be brought into the mix, as well as both GMP and Vermont Gas offer on-bill financing options as well. So there's the home energy loan that Efficiency Vermont offers. It can be 0% for some household incomes that are eligible in various terms, or the on-bill approach is a really smart approach too. And in many cases, if you do the right projects first, you can actually, if you finance it, spread those costs over time, you can be cash flow neutral and even positive in some situations right from the get-go. And then, of course, once that loan is paid off, well, then you're able to take advantage of all the savings. But that's a great option for folks who don't have the cash to outlay right up front to do high capital improvements like weatherization or some new heating system in their home.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on some points that both Paul and Zach have made, where trying to address home energy use and even knowing where to start can be daunting for the average layperson. So we actually, similar to Efficiency Vermont with the home energy visits, we have an energy coaching program. So if you're a Vermont Gas customer, you can get a free either in-person or virtual coaching call from a member of our team to help understand what the opportunities are, where to start, where there can be some low cost or no cost improvements that can be made. How are things looking from a structural standpoint? How are things that may be standing in the way of being able to do a good weatherization project? And the concierge model that Zach mentioned, I really like that word. Right now, there's this patchwork of funding, not only through our programs, but through federal dollars coming into the state with all variety of rules and income qualification. And our team is really getting up to speed and becoming experts in terms of, for a particular homeowner, for a particular situation, regardless of whether it's VGS, Vermont Gas, providing the money or not, really being able to play matchmaker and help homeowners understand what the opportunities are and then how to bring the funding to the table in order to get things across the finish line. So
we'll get to a specific question about a couple of those things in a second, but we've been through a couple round of questions, and I just want to remind everybody that if you do have a question, feel free to write it on your pad, and Jenna or Jim will be there. Feel free to flag them down, and they'll come and collect it for you. And I had a follow-up question for the audience. Is everybody hearing okay? How are people feeling with the panelists?
Yeah, I can hear.
Good.
We
Awesome.
have enough room to move you guys in if you would like to get a little closer so you can see or hear better.
I'm okay.
You
All
all
right.
right? And what about, ma'am, would you like to move up a little bit? Be a little closer?
Excuse me?
Would you like to move your chair up a little bit so you can hear a little better?
No, I can hear. I just didn't realize you were talking.
Okay. Well, there's plenty of room if you want to move up a little bit. Sorry, guys, I just
no
want
worries.
She's in a comfy seat.
to make sure.
That's it.
It's like church, nobody sits in the front.
So I heard something about roofing, right? Structural improvements, and we did have a question, and I just wanted to be really specific on this point. If someone was asking, can I get help paying for structural or roof repairs specifically? Does that sound like anything anybody specifically deals with here, or would it be possible to point someone in a good direction for structural roof repairs?
Well, this program that I just mentioned that just launched because of federal funds is for low and moderate income customers, which actually covers a wide swath of us. If you look at, a home of 4 in Franklin County, I want to say it's in the vicinity of like $140,000 household income a year. So, it's not an exclusive offer. That would be somewhere, and again, but it needs to be because it's in the way of weatherizing the home. So those are the sort of things that can be done. Beyond that, there are contractors through our network that can be referred, but that's just one particular piece I wanted to put out there.
Yeah. And something similar, this might have tied into the some of the payment options that you had mentioned. Someone asked, are there ways to pay for energy improvements without having to, quote unquote, have all the money up front, right? Does that tie in with one of the things you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, there was 2 things, and please speak to the wrap piece as well. But Efficiency Vermont has the home energy loan, and there's various terms, but typically for certain income eligible customers under 5 years, it could be 0% financing, which again, if you can right out of the gate lower your energy use and then spread the payment of those improvements over time, it can be cash flow neutral or cash flow positive for you over that time. Like, in other words, month to month, year to year, you're spending the same as you were with your higher energy costs, but now some of it's shifted to a loan, or actually it could be lower because it just works out that way over time. So that's one approach. The other is the on-bill approach with RAP, and I don't know if one of you wants to speak to that.
Yeah, happy to jump in here. Yeah, so although 0% money over 5 years is really attractive, sometimes it can still lead to a costly monthly payment. So the Weatherization Repayment Assistance Program is delivered through Green Mountain Power, Efficiency Vermont, Vermont Gas, and administered by Vermont Housing Finance Agency. You can effectively get a 2-year term up to 15 years. So that's a way to really be able to cut monthly payments and be able to get your energy savings over the course of the year to actually exceed what those payments are on an annual basis. So to the cash flow positive nature, this is a great way of being able to do it, as well as not having to make a payment to a bank or a credit union, because it actually goes on your Vermont gas bill or your Green Mountain Power bill.
A couple times in some of these responses you've mentioned income eligibility. We had a question from the audience. How can I find out if I meet those income eligibility requirements?
Yeah, a couple different ways. On our website, if you look at any of the services that you're interested in, it's pretty easy, just a couple steps. If you go to efficiencyvermont.com, click on the rebates, and it'll ask you a couple questions. Are you looking at heating and cooling or insulating and air sealing your home? Are you residential? And then immediately it lays out the options. You'll see an eligibility tab there, and it shows a table, and you'll see, for us, Franklin County, how many people in your home, what's your household income, and you can see if you're eligible. And you can always give us a call too to verify that as well. And again, that opens up some additional offers and services for you.
And from a consistency standpoint, these income eligible guidelines are the same for all of us. So we work in a coordinated fashion, generally in the May timeframe when these income levels change, to ensure that everybody has the same consistent information.
Is that pre-tax income, the income eligibility requirements, is that pre-tax or after?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
I'm looking
Is
at
it
the
on there?
form
It's
here
on that chart
now.
right there.
Yes, it's pre-tax income. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Noted. Shifting gears a little bit, but this ties into some of those, maybe that weatherization, those weatherization steps. Someone had a specific question about weather stripping and caulking. What if I don't know how to do weather stripping and caulking? What common mistakes do people make when they're taking those steps in their homes? I don't know if you had any advice on that particular point.
We do have some YouTube videos that you can get through our website that walk you through some of these, and I think they're helpful. But that would be one thing. Of course, beyond us too, there's some great resources just for some of these easy steps to make sure that you do it right. And it may be also worth looking into Contractor Network and just seeing if there's somebody who can take a more comprehensive look at improvements, and weighing that as an option.
Personally, I'm a fool with this foam gun. Like every year you go up and look for, there you go.
There you go.
Right here. This thing is everyone's friend. You can find,
what is that specifically?
this one's foam sealant. It's a foam filler, and then you go look for cracks and not everyone can go up in the attic and in the basement, but filling just the sill plate of your home where it meets the concrete, and then specifically any cracks and gaps in anything that you can see in your attic, if you can access your attic safely and reasonably, and any places outside where that structure could be compromised a little bit. This is a very easy solution to all of it. So you don't want to use it as a whole filler. It's not meant to fill big voids, but it's actually meant just to fill cracks and gaps and whatnot. So that's probably the easiest tool that folks could use. And then caulking goes in a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
I'd say that probably the most frequent mistake that's made with do-it-yourself air sealing is just not finding all of those
Right.
holes and penetrations.
That's right.
So this is where, through some of the YouTube videos posted on Efficiency Vermont, or some kind of do-it-yourself guides that the Department of Energy has, that can help you just kind of have a guided tour around your own home and knowing what to look for. There are the obvious holes where you can see light outside, and then there are some that may be up in attics and basements or other hard-to-reach places that frequently occur in a home and can be really impactful, but you just got to know where to look for them. And this is where the benefit of actually having a energy audit, having an outside professional come in, put a big fan in the front door of the house, suck all the air out of the house, that can help you show where all of those cracks and crevices might be, and bring in a professional or be able to guide you to where to focus some attention with a variety of different air sealing products like this spray foam here.
Right.
Just make sure you use a low expansion one around windows and doors.
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
That's
right.
the other thing,
Yeah.
because that can really throw things out of square, like that window won't open in the spring. But yeah, and that's
Safe.
where the tips can come in helpful.
Yeah, and you're wearing your personal protective equipment when you're doing so, like glasses and gloves.
Of course.
Right. But,
May I share an anecdote just to that effort in terms of
Absolutely.
looking? This is going back a few years, but there was a big fuel spike back in the early 2000s, and a neighbor reached out to me and was really sort of shaken by it, because what would have been probably a couple $1,000s in fuel costs for that winter, and they live in an old farmhouse that he grew up in. It was going to be in the thousands and thousands of dollars, given how fuel prices had spiked. And again, to your questions around what do people do next, and as you said, Tim, it can really sort of paralyze people, like, because there's so many choices, you don't want to make the wrong one. And they were looking at all sorts of solutions to try to mitigate those costs. And I encouraged them just to give our staff a call, and it really sort of helped him figure out that path forward. In the end, he did some weatherizing, and it wasn't tearing all the walls apart. It was a crawl space that was under the kitchen, because it was, typical older home. There's a stone foundation on one part. There's a crawl space on an addition that was put in later, and also in the attic area. And a big sort of eye-opener for him was when they did the blower door test, where they try to find where the leaks are. There was an interior room to the house that had air coming through an old ceiling mount for a light that was no longer there.
right.
This room had no exterior walls, and the air was just rushing in through there, and that was a big wow moment for him. So my point on all this is he was able to take steps that were within his means to button up that home. As one of our old colleagues would say, it's like a good pair of wool socks and a wool cap. It was just the bottom of the home and the top of the home, air sealed, made all the difference to bring his fuel costs down in a home that's over 100 years old.
You can feel the difference
Yep.
from that
Yep.
moving air in the draft, and from the, what do they call it, the chimney effect from the basement.
Right.
If there's gaps in your basement door per se, or a window going straight up through, you can feel the difference when it's done.
As Zach is describing, that delta between your inside home temperature and that outside, the bigger the difference, the more you get this push of air through the bottom of your home up through the top. So there's this negative air pressure. And we'll feel that sometimes in our basement in the winter, right? But then we also see it, through the roof of our house, where if we get a light dusting of snow, we can see where the melting starts right away. And that's that action in effect.
Yeah. And although we're on the cusp of winter around the corner, the same principles apply during the summer months. So those same air leaks can lead to lots of moisture and heat coming into the house that you're maybe trying to air condition or cool down. So there's the double benefit of not only fuel savings during the winter months, but also electricity savings and just a more comfortable home environment to live in during the summer.
Yeah, you can really coast through some hot events
Absolutely.
if you've got a well-insulated home.
I had a couple questions. I was glad you made that transition from home heating to home cooling. We had a question, what's the best way to get air conditioning in a home? What's the first step to get air conditioning?
Well, we all have different rebates. For number one, we think you can go with a traditional window set AC unit, and that's great. There's not as efficient now as like a mini split heat pump that does not only cooling, doubles down as heating in the winter and dehumidification. So I think we all would agree a heat pump's probably the best way to go. If you can, use the programs, there's rebates that we all partner with to allow those at point of sale. So it kind of makes it easy for a customer to go to a distributor or a contractor that's going to put this in and go to a distributor and get those point of sale rebates. There's some, again, back to the low income, there's some additional funds for the low income that meet on that chart we were talking about earlier. That allows for some more incentives. That's something to look into, number one. I know Efficiency Vermont offers definitely another regular AC unit plug-in rebate, right?
Yeah, we have rebates for window units that are more efficient, and we have our joint rebates with Green Mountain Power and the other electric utilities for cold climate heat pumps. Either ductless systems, which are those sort of head units you see on the wall, right, that blow air directly, or some that can integrate into your home's central heating system.
Yep.
And if I can just add to that, to the question, if you have forced hot air in your home, you have a ducted air system versus a hot water system, it might be a great fit. It may be something that's good because you can do both heating and cooling with a heat pump that's through your ducted system, and it can also be there in tandem with your heating system.
I think
as
that's
well.
one of your questions on there.
Yeah, maybe this gets at that a little bit, but someone had asked, how can I tell if air-to-air heat pumps versus a centralized air-to-water heat pump versus a heat pump gas hybrid system or other option makes the most sense for my home? So I mentioned a few things there. There's an air-to-air heat pump option.
Yeah.
There's a centralized air-to-water heat pump option. There's a heat pump or gas hybrid. Which one of those options makes sense, and how can you tell?
Go for it, Paul.
Yeah, there's a couple factors at play. It's like, what do you really want to achieve out of that in terms of how much you want to use that system? I think also, do you have a forced air system versus what you call a hydronic or a water-based heating system? Because again, that forced air can be used to move heat pump heat. I think also the layout of your home is another factor. If you have a home that's very broken up with a lot of little rooms, and if you had a single unit, a ductless heat pump is not unlike a wood stove or a pellet stove. It's going to heat from one space, and you're counting on that heat to move its way through the home. Some homes work great for that. Works great in my home, but if you have a home that's very broken up, it may not.
Right.
And then the other piece I would say is, what is the vintage of that home? How weatherized is it? Is also going to influence, like, how much can I lean on that system?
Right.
So if I've got a very open space and I just want to do some of my heating and cooling, maybe a ductless system's the right thing. If I'm really trying to take it to that next level and lean on that heat pump more, then I think a hybrid system might be good. And, moving all electric is going to depend on really what that home is capable of. Some homes, if there's a lot of air leakage and they're not well insulated, heat pumps simply can't keep up with it. They're very efficient. They're extremely efficient, but they can't put out the BTUs of heat like oil or fired system can, right? And that's where it has trouble keeping up. And that's why we always say try to look at these things in tandem with weatherization.
Right, and then, what about, if you did have a ducted furnace push hot air, how well is that duct work? Is it old? Is it insulated?
Does it reach all the places in the home?
Reach all the places. You could put a heat pump in that, it would hypothetically work, but if the duct work is in poor shape, it's not getting to where it is, or it's, condensating and cooling off before it even gets to the place where it wants to heat. That's something to look into. Paul mentioned the hydronic system, the hot water that circulates around the house. That's a really efficient system. If you can put a heat pump to that and use the existing infrastructure, great. Again, it's not always the case to make that happen.
Yeah, those are harder to retrofit.
They're harder to retrofit, but there's technology's coming where they're actually making it a lot easier than they did 10 years ago to retrofit some of those older technologies.
The water temperatures are lower, so that's why they don't work so well with your traditional radiator in the home.
Yeah.
And if someone was making that decision, right, about which one works best, where would you think their first step would be to go to evaluate those options?
Do you evaluate it?
Yeah, our energy coach would be happy to be a good first step for any Vermont Gas customer. So in addition to looking at these kind of low cost, no cost, maybe do-it-yourself weatherization improvements, if there's a real interest around heat pumps, really being able to understand, is it a forced hot air system? Is it a hydronic system? What's the layout of the house? How weatherized is it? To be able to at least steer homeowners in the right direction as to what they should be talking with contractors about and asking for. So it's kind of like a little bit of just explaining the lingo, explaining the vocabulary so that you can actually speak to a contractor what you think you need to be able to get a proposal.
I think all three of us, all three of our organizations have coaches to be able to do that, right? So you can call in Vermont Gas or a Vermont Gas customer, Efficiency Vermont, Green Mountain Power. We can all have those conversations every day to figure out what's might be and help you guide. We're not going to make the decisions, and we're going to leave it up to the professionals, contractors to do the work and actually make those final decisions, but we can guide folks along the way to make it happen.
Yeah, it equips you to have that conversation then with a contractor if you're ready to make that step.
Earlier, you had talked about that BTU output and the importance of weatherizing homes and making sure there aren't leaks. But someone had a question about air-to-air heat pumps specifically. I've heard that for some buildings, an air-to-air heat pump big enough to handle the coldest nights is too inefficient for average winter weather. How do I know if my house has the right characteristics for an all-air source heat pump approach?
I think that gets back to what we were just saying about the age of the home, how well it's insulated and air sealed, and that it's tempting to try to give a one-size-fits-all answer, but the good news is there isn't. So having somebody really take a look at your situation and figure out what is feasible, what could that system do with your current state of your home, and what would it cost to improve your home if it's needed to make that doable. Again, heat pumps are incredibly efficient. It's a question of whether or not they can keep up with the heat loss of the home. So it's less about the performance of the heat pump, and it's more about the state and the performance of the home and how leaky that home is.
Yeah, an important first step with this is understanding what the total heat load is for the house divided by the square footage. So that'll give you the amount of heat loss, how to potentially size the heat pump, as well as is a heat pump your next step, or really should you weatherize to be able to lower your energy use intensity before you can reasonably consider to carry your entire heating needs with a heat pump or some other solution. So that's something that
if you get all those done, I think the answer to the question is it will work. I mean, that's essentially what we're saying. You can heat. We have customers all over Vermont that do heat their house with heat pumps alone, and their houses, typically are that weatherized, buttoned-up house. Maybe even some of them aren't as tight as they want them to be, and the heat pump is not as efficient during those really cold days now we have in Vermont. I was going to say almost said months, but now it's we have cold days. But yeah, and that's kind of where it goes.
I just add also, by looking at the two in tandem, this idea of making sure your home is weatherized and looking at the heating system, you can right size that heating system. You're not trying to size it to a leaky home. You're sizing it to a home that's performing well. And also the financing options that we've all mentioned, either the on-bill with what's called RAP or the home energy loan that Efficiency Vermont offers, is you can bundle those together as well, and that's great. So they really do work together to bring that solution. And again, speaking with us on the phone and as a first step, and then most likely getting a contractor involved too to really sort of dial it in, can assure that what's being proposed really works for your situation.
Yeah, there's a lot of homes that have kind of grown over time to what's known as hybrid heating.
Right.
So maybe you have natural gas space heater in one room and you're using electric resistance in another room, and you've got a wood stove somewhere else just because of kind of how the house is laid out and kind of how it's grown up over time. That hybrid heating approach can be really valuable, especially if you're integrating heat pumps into the mix, where you have a system that is designed and can handle those really coldest days of winter, but the heat pump can actually carry the load for the remainder of your winter. By being able to actually run a heat pump down to 30, 35 degrees outside, you can instantly cut your gas use by about 30 to 35% and not actually see an increase in your holistic energy costs. And then depending on, what you're willing to, pay for your home heating, you can potentially go a little bit lower with that heat pump or rely upon a natural gas or other fossil fuel backup system.
Or even wood, right?
Or even wood.
So I'm a Vermonter. I have a heat pump upstairs in my house that we use for cooling in the summertime because that's where the heat is. It heats the upstairs a little bit when needed. But downstairs I have a pellet stove in the corner, and I have a wood stove in the basement that heats our house. So I live on property where I can cut my own wood and keep me active, and I do it. That's my choice. But that's kind of how that hybrid approach works for me. So we try to use all three of those methods to make it happen.
You mentioned cold days or
Yeah.
cold nights,
Yeah.
and heat pumps. Someone asked about heat pump water heaters. Is a heat pump water heater a good idea if your hot water heater is in the basement and you have a cold basement? Is there any difference between that situation and having a heated basement as opposed to a colder, unheated basement?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I would just say that I think in unconditioned space, it would not be. Cooler is a subjective thing, and I mean, I have in my basement, it's a fairly well insulated home, but with that heat pump in the winter, it gets into the 50s down there. I'm still able to heat water with it. I would also add in the summer, they're fantastic because they dehumidify my basement.
Right.
And I get a lot of cold off of that I then take advantage of for the first floor of my home. I put a fan at the bottom of the stairs and
Blow
use it,
upstairs.
and then if I can get any other air downstairs that can then be turned into hot water is great. So it's a great setup. But yeah, you do have people who have old stone basements that really are just shy of being outdoors in some regards. Not the best setup. They can be situated on a living space floor. Noise can be an issue. You need to have enough space around them because essentially what they're doing is they're pulling that latent heat out of the air to make hot water. So being aware of that, it may not be good in all situations. And again, that's where we can help and where a contractor can too.
Yeah. General rule of thumb that if your basement is getting down to 50 degrees or less during the winter months, it probably isn't a great application for a heat pump water heater just because there isn't enough surrounding heat for the heat pump water heater to perform, and it can lead to freezing pipes. So
We had some other home energy questions. Someone in the audience asked, we've started a remodel in our home. We've ordered Energy Star appliances. Is it too late to get rebates?
There are a few appliances that have rebates. It really depends on what. A lot of the I encourage folks to purchase and choose Energy Star appliances, but many now the efficiency is so high that we're not offering incentives on them anymore. There are some things like dehumidifiers, the window air conditioners, the heat pump water heaters, but a fridge no longer. Heat pump dryer is an option. But encourage folks to get Energy Star appliances. Look on our website of what you're purchasing is eligible for an incentive. But the good news is a lot of these appliances have become so efficient that delta between what is the baseline is improved and there's little movement in terms of more efficient equipment. And Efficiency Vermont has taken our resources to move them towards other things that really stand to be more improved and help customers make that investment easier.
We talked earlier about roofing and ceiling. A member of the audience asked, we have to replace our roof and we're told we do not have the correct ventilation. Can we get help with that and within a short time? So the question is, replacing a roof, don't have the correct ventilation, or we're told that, what's the timeline on getting help with that, or in a situation like that, what help might be available?
I would have them start by giving us a call to see what contractors are in the network that might be able to do a visit, and also see if there's anything that we can do through a virtual home energy visit. That may be a little too difficult to do through that sort of mechanism, but at least get folks pointed in the right direction, because ventilation within a crawl space, an attic, a roof is important, especially if there's any sort of air leakage from that conditioned space into that unconditioned space. You're having essentially warm, moist air from where we all live going into these areas that soon is going to be very cold. It condenses, and then you get mold and rot issues that can come up with that.
Yep. I've actually been in some attics where it's been raining from the underside of the roof just because of exactly that issue. Warm, moist air that wasn't properly sealed coming from the conditioned space, underside of the roof, condense, and fell as rain. So that was a roof ventilation issue as well as an air sealing issue. And this is where actually having some professional help to be able to identify what the problem is and then what are the options to solve it is really important.
This is a more general question. We were talking about a lot of home improvements and homeowner questions, but companion question to that for a different group of folks. If you're a renter, right? If you're renting a home, I guess the question is, what steps would you advise renters take to lower their energy costs or increase energy efficiency?
I put some information forms over on the table for renters, and you may be eligible for a packet from us that has some light bulbs and some other pieces. If it's a Vermont gas area, it will be focused on just the light bulbs, but if not, we'll have some shower heads and things like that, because again, when we're in the same area together, VGS's focuses on the space and water heating, and we're focused on the electric. And when it's outside of Vermont gas territory, we're able to help in both areas. So there's some distinction there. But I encourage folks to take a look at that and see what they're eligible for. And again, it's those items that, when we were talking earlier about what you should do in your home, there's this longer roadmap of what to do for higher cost improvements, but there's also some low cost things that you can do, and a renter can take advantage of that too with lighting, controls, things of that nature. If you have a dehumidifier that you need to run, making sure it's an energy efficient one, and we can provide you a rebate for that. So there's things that are yours within that space that you can put more efficient items in.
I would have, I would have the landlord, have the renter get the landlord to call us.
Yep.
Exactly. There's a lot of programs that we offer some incentives for everything we've been talking about through here, making everything tight and efficient. And so that the bottom line is that the end user, the renter, benefits from some of the things that the landlord can put in as their asset to keep on renting and making that home or that space comfortable for their renters. And we have a lot of programs that offer those landlords to make it happen. So that's what I would encourage renters to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an important conversation to have. And in a lot of cases, if at least 50% of the tenants qualify through some income eligible program or the rent levels are below a certain threshold, then regardless of what the landlord's income is, the building would actually qualify for a lot of our income eligible programs.
Yes.
So that's definitely the best way to leverage all of the funding that's available for a path forward.
And the weatherization incentives apply per unit in that case as well, which is a new sort of feature of our program. And that really opens it up for rental property owners. So there's some additional information I have up there for any rental property owners, and encourage them to call. And it's great, yes, when a tenant can reach out in tandem with the property owner,
right,
and see how we can help both of them. Some things are clearly with the building, and we can work with that property owner, and some things may be more focused on the tenant.
Right.
A different angle on the rental property question. We had someone ask, what can a small business owner do if the business space they're in is leased?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Very, very similar though in that,
Yeah.
are there some things around lighting and controls? We have some incentives for commercial kitchen equipment that may be really sort of with the tenant. And there may be some larger items that are specific and sort of anchored to that space. And again, as Zach noted, that's where we'd love to talk with both folks. And it may be really an appealing proposition to both the property owner as well as the tenant, because they want that business to thrive. They don't want turnover in that space. And we've done that in a lot of situations. We've gone in side by side with each other into small businesses and large businesses to see how we can help them. And oftentimes they are in lease spaces. So
They are, and,
Yeah.
and you know what we're, you know, for Green Mountain Power, what we can bring to the table is offering, you know, getting that customer, if they're energy burdened with, you know, some fossil fuel that's just outdated, inefficient. How can we get them off that fossil fuel, and working with the property owner and the tenant to make it happen, to bring some dollars to the table to say, okay, this is, you know, the end user is going to gain. The property owner is going to essentially have the asset. So how can we come to the table together to make it happen? The customer can save because they're using the technology, and the property owner has that asset on hand for, you know, a 20-year lifespan, 15-year lifespan.
I would add, just to the point around small businesses, the best time to reach out is when you're already going to be doing something within that space. And there's many times businesses are looking to remodel or looking at they need more capacity to do whatever they're doing. That's a great time to bring efficiency into it, right?
Something's on its last leg.
Right.
We got to replace
Right.
X, whatever that is. It's like, okay, how do we, before it fails, whatever that may be, you know, bring some folks into the conversation so we can start planning and understanding what's available.
Yeah, then energy efficiency is woven into
Right.
your business plan. And same with your home. I mean, it's bringing it in when you're making those decisions. Your question earlier about heat pump water heater, I made that move from having a propane-fired heat pump water heater to a heat pump water heater when I knew I needed to replace it. And I started thinking about it about a year in advance because I had to wire it first. But I didn't wait for the thing to come home and find a puddle on the floor. I did it, you know, in advance when I started. Now, hey, this thing's 16 years old now. I'm going to start making a switch.
Thinking about switching to new types of energy or home heating, we had a question about geothermal energy systems, which is and the question was, is there a way for several homeowners to get together to share a geothermal system? How could that work? And what are the pros and cons?
So there's been a lot of good work by a group called Vermont Thermal Energy Networks that's been really looking at these community-based models and how to borrow good ideas from other states that have something similar to this, New York being one of those. It's actually something that Vermont Gas Systems is looking at, where we know with a geothermal system, the most expensive part of it is having to put wells, and sometimes deep wells, into the ground, which can serve as a barrier for homeowners in particular moving forward with a geothermal system. Even though it is the most efficient and lowest cost to operate, it's really expensive on the front end.
There's the answer to your question. It really is. It's the most efficient, but it capital-wise, it's the most cost prohibitive upfront. So you have a lower operating cost, but higher capital cost all in,
Yep.
right? So I'm sorry to interrupt him.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's a good point of emphasis there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we as a utility are looking at different business models and approaches to deliver exactly what kind of addresses that question of, is there a role for utility or some other entity to own the loop, the really expensive part, who has maybe a longer investment time horizon of 25 or 50 years where that investment can pay off, and then working with homeowners or businesses in some type of a mixed use arrangement through either kind of selling the BTUs of heating and cooling or a subscription-based model or some type of lease model in order to make the numbers work for individuals to be able to accelerate and move forward with a geothermal project. So yeah, we're looking at it within our footprint. I know there's community groups and some energy committees that are trying to explore how to set up those structures in other communities outside of Vermont Gas territory. And it's really exciting, and it's been proven that it can work in other jurisdictions. It's a little bit more complex of having to make sure you've got kind of the anchor tenants or users that are there that can effectively support the business model or the financing that can pay it off over time. But we're going to start seeing these types of projects pop up relatively soon.
On the multi-unit and even new builds, there's a pretty large tax credit out there through the ITC, it's called, for folks that want to invest in this geothermal network to gain a lot of tax benefit back from it if you were the owner I forget how many years it is now. If you own that system outright for so many years, you can gain the tax credit, at least up to 30% for it, which is used to be just for some solar and some battery storage, and now geothermal's added to that. So it's actually made these projects for folks that are doing some rehab on some different multi-unit developments or new developments actually pencil out that large capital cost, knowing that they're going to get tax credit back from it in the future.
You had mentioned finding that core user base for geothermal, and then you mentioned the tax credit. So just to summarize, would you suggest networking with neighbors or some partners in your community and maybe explore applying for those tax credits?
Yep.
Yeah. You mentioned solar and battery storage as well, and a couple questions about that came up. The first one is, when do emergency storage wall batteries make sense for an average home or small business?
We think they make sense at Green Mountain Power. It's we lease them now for $55 a month. You get this kind of stacked value out of it. Number one, you use it for reliability. Obviously, in today's world, we don't want any power to go out. With the storms that hit us nowadays, that it does happen even to the tightest neighborhood in South Burlington, all the way to the ends of the state in Vermont. We're seeing climate change and impact hit us regularly. So, although we try to keep lights on, these power walls or battery packs are great for reliability. We see that they can, folks, if they manage their load correctly, can go days without it. It allows us to pick up our infrastructure, and they can keep their critical loads going. So that's number one. Number two, and now we're using them to give back to the grid when there's maybe in New England low capacity and high prices. We're asking those customers that have these battery walls to dispatch them back to the grid to lower what the energy we need at those high price times, and saves dollars for essentially every Vermonter. So those two values that you have into it, and we're seeing a really large uptick in it because those values are great, and you can manage other ways to use that load around your home or even small business, appropriately. We have folks that can get really technical in how they spend that stored power. It's not for everyone, but they can do it. So it makes sense for a lot of residential. Not only we have a couple of different manufacturers coming to the table every year. We had, I'm not going to name all the manufacturers or even anyone, but there's multiple manufacturers in the battery storage now that are producing batteries that are great. That we at GMP we lease, but also you could bring your own battery, and we can give some incentive dollars to participate in our program if you choose to do so.
Battery storage was one part of it, and then the other part of it were the solar energy, solar panels. We had a few questions on that. Number one, I've heard that solar panels are getting better all the time. What's new? Do new approaches make rooftop solar easier or cheaper? So it's kind of a two-parter. Solar panels, are they getting better all the time? What's new, and are there new approaches that make rooftop solar easier?
I don't think any of us up here are solar developers, but I would have to, just from kind of industry knowledge, that the panels are getting better. They're lasting longer. They probably are coming down in price per panel. So yes, that's one. Number two is in the state regulation, it's actually not, the price per the kilowatt hour is actually decreasing that you can get from your local distribution utilities from the state standard. So that part is kind of waning. It started off really high, and now it's actually, the net metering value is decreasing. There's been some change in the legislature that's actually decreasing. So it's getting better on the one side, the technology side, but the actual pennies per kilowatt hour that you're getting is decreasing. So I think you have to do your diligence when you're putting these on. For every resident, it might be different in what they want to achieve. yeah, there's different options for all different folks, for sure.
I would just add also, oftentimes I think solar gets people's attention. It's something that it's very visible. It's gratifying, and I'm a proponent of it. But I would encourage folks to look at also their home in terms of how well it's weatherized, and how they're using energy before they size that system. Because if you have an inefficient home, and you haven't, so where have you not decreased your use? And where might you increase it through electrifying? Well, like heat pumps or an EV. Do those things first, then size the system. Now you're putting on a home that you know is
Right.
structurally sound,
Good
is
point,
energy
Paul.
efficient, and the energy you are using is maximized before you then put that on. It's anecdotal, but you talk to a lot of folks. That doesn't always happen in that order. So I just encourage folks to look at that. Put that in your map.
I had a
that you're talking
conversation
about.
with a gentleman today,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
he's like, "Oh, I'm going to get solar. What should I get?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know what size your load is at your house." And he's like, "Okay." And then I'm like, "Are you going to get some heat pumps?" Yes. "Are you going to get an EV?" Yes. I'm like, "Okay, then we need to figure out what that actual load is on your house, so you can maybe size that correctly."
Because you could have too much capacity, and now you're locked in with a lease on solar panels, or conversely the opposite.
Right.
I didn't always think about getting an EV or heat pumps, and now it's not sized enough. So those are good things to think through.
There's a lot of on the solar thing. There's a lot of great providers in Vermont, vendors, that solar developers that really do a good job stepping customers through that. So I would advise to go see a solar provider in Vermont to answer some of those questions.
We were talking about homeowners, and we touched on renters a bit before. There's another follow-up question this might relate. What do you think about the idea of portable balcony or wall-mounted solar panels? Could they be a good idea for renters or for homes with the wrong kinds of roofs? Quote, unquote?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
can't
That's a tough one. I mean, for certain aspects, if you can provide, I guess a mobile solar panel. I know they're good for different, if you're going camping or if you're running here comes deer season up to deer camp, maybe. That's what I'm thinking of. I'm the old days of, there used to be solar hot water heating, I think, was a great method for many years and probably still available, but it's now been replaced with a heat pump hot water heater that we're just talking about. I know some of that might have been not so permanent, maybe, or maybe it is.
But I think to your point earlier also is engaging some of these vendors because they're really good.
Yeah.
And seeing what are the options.
Right.
Again, it's not a one size fits all, and what's available, and then look at the numbers.
I wanted to touch on a few remaining questions. Again, talking about homes, and we're talking about everything from these Cadillac geothermal projects to some solar projects to things on the low end, like low cost efficiency steps that renters can take, right? So there's a huge spectrum of what people can take advantage of and what's out there. But for a homeowner, and thinking about all these different things they can do and pick, I expect to own my home for a long time. So this is someone maybe just starting out in a home, and they have all these ideas or thoughts about what they want to do to this home. They want to avoid quick fixes and that just have to be redone later. So we're taking kind of some of those temporary, small-term things off the table. What's the best way to avoid fossil fuels with the long term in mind for a home?
If I may, I'd go back to some of the things we started with, and that is really making sure that home is really prepared to take on new state-of-the-art equipment. So, if you have a basement that has a moisture issue, or you got an uninsulated crawl space, or there's questions up as somebody was asking earlier around the roofing and the attic space, make sure that those are spot on and they're taken care of. Now you've got the canvas to begin to plug in these other pieces. And that's where I would encourage virtual home energy visit. I would encourage the financing options to then start looking at the mechanical equipment in your home, and then couple that with those easier things of lighting and appliances that just happen as you're maintaining your home. So take that time to, as much as you want to like put in that heat pump or solar panels or what have you, get that home ready, and then start to work on what's maybe in your home near end of life. So I'm going to think about that one first.
Right.
It may be the least expensive, or it may be one of the higher cost items, but I'm going to be faced with that sooner rather than later. And it's better that I plan for it now versus having it fail in February, and I'm now in an emergency situation. And you know what? I had to just get something put in, and now whatever I put in, I'll have for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So those would be some of the things that I would recommend.
Yeah, you said a really important word, plan. And having a plan, since trying to do it all at once is often outside of the budget for most Vermont families. So understanding what's the state of your current equipment, what needs to be replaced sooner rather than later, evaluating what options might be out there, what do you need for any type of home repair or electrical infrastructure within the home in order to lay the groundwork to future-proof so that you can have those options in the future. Is really important. And I do want to put in a plug for a recently launched program by all three of us, as well as Burlington Electric, the Home Electrical System Upgrade Funding.
Good job.
Which has been moving into the state where we know that typically 60 to 70% of homes can't just move forward with a heat pump, or in some cases even an electric vehicle charger, because the panel or the service is not sized for being able to accommodate those additional electrical loads.
Right.
So for income eligible households, between 90 to 100% of the cost can be covered with this grant funding, up to $10,000 per home.
Right.
And it's a great opportunity until that funding runs out to get that infrastructure in place so that it can give you options to heat pump, that it can give you options to move to an electric vehicle, and other things that you might be considering where the panel or the service might be standing in the way.
Can I add to that? Because I think that's a really key point. That electric panel is really sort of the what's holding back a lot of these older homes.
Yeah.
But with that,
Like 60 amp panels.
exactly,
Yeah.
where many times you'll be needing a 200 amp service within the home. So there's a big difference between some of these older homes have. But Tim's point around this panel upgrade and this electrical system funding that we now all have available through federal funding, there's also similar funding to allow for 90 to 100% of a heat pump water heater for low and moderate income households. There's the home repair program that I mentioned earlier to repair those items that are getting in the way of you weatherizing your home. There is incentives available for weatherization that have never been this high, up to $9,500 for weatherization in a home because of some additional federal funding. So those are only going to be around for a little while. So those are great things to think about now and take advantage of it. And they really are the cornerstones for all the other, I think, more exciting, cooler stuff. But even if you never did the heat pump or the EV or the solar, you've got a home that's going to be more comfortable, that's going to be more durable, it's going to stay cooler in the summer, warmer in the winter, and be less susceptible to issues that become costlier down the road.
I mean, we all know that. To answer your question, kind of go back to that original question, is like maintenance in your home is not a one-time thing. It's going to continue for the life of that home.
It's ongoing.
Right. And like Tim said, planning for like what do we want to do and plan for, what are we using the advantage of all these programs are here, how can you step through them that makes a lot of sense for that home.
We've talked about an immense amount of work that people can have done to their home or to themselves. We've talked about everything from installing again those geothermal wells to you have a can of foam spray on the table, right? So I just we've mentioned it a few times this evening, but just to be clear, how does somebody find someone qualified to do all this work? And specifically do the work of installation, evaluation, etc. I just wanted to get that answer down real clear. Where does someone find a qualified team to do this?
We've got a great website with a network of contractors, and they're closely coordinated with our partners in this as well. So easy to find and break them down by different categories. And again, we work closely with this network. Like for the heat pump contractors, there's monthly communications and calls and discussions with them around both the program, but also what's coming out for new products. So I think that's a great starting point. Or give any one of us a call.
Yeah.
Right. We can definitely all of us recommend. We on this side are trying to, encourage the workforce out there, labor force, to happen, as we see there's dollars here. We see there's a need. There is a need, I think, in Vermont for more labor force to make all this happen. So we're all trying to bring everyone together to help them in that workforce understand what the programs and the incentives are, so they can work for Vermonters for sure.
And you mentioned the website to find the contractors. Is that efficiency?
Efficiencyvermont.com, yes. And then you'll see a link at the top for finding a contractor.
Awesome.
And again, they're categorized to make it easy to find.
We had some questions, just some general discussion about electric vehicles, but generally electric transportation, yes, cars, bikes, and the ability to charge them at home. I drove in on an EV, passed some coming on the way here.
Mm-hmm.
The library here has electric bikes that folks can book and rent and take them out to drive.
It's amazing.
We're seeing more and more electrified or partially electrified vehicles out on the roads, right? I was curious if who in the panel might just want to speak to some of the opportunities that are out there for folks thinking about getting an electric vehicle or exploring just electric transportation in general, bikes, etc.
We know, and we're trying to cut carbon in the state, and the two leading carbon emissions is through heating and cooling and transportation. We know that's what's causing a lot of our carbon and climate change. So through transportation, EV being one of the ones that there's a lot of more vehicles out there being manufactured. GMP offers and actually most DUs in the state, distribution utilities, offer a pretty good incentive, partnering with not only dealerships along the way, but offering just, if you send in a form, you provide your account number and your registration, you can get up to, I know we have $2,200 rebate, but I think other distribution utilities have around the same thing. Love seeing those electric vehicles hitting the road. Vermont does pretty well in the grand scheme of things. In the per capita, we definitely, there's a lot
approaching 10% of vehicles.
Yeah. At Green Mountain Power, when you do that, my teammate over here, Jen, would be the one to help process that rebate, and then we would give you a actual residential charger for your home if you would enroll in our rate. What that rate does, it gives you a little bit of a discount rate if you allow us to control the charger back again to those peak times when we're seeing high costs, low capacity New England market. We're controlling that charger to swing at our system peak, and it works. So you get a better rate, you get a charger, you get an incentive, and I'll tell anyone, because I drive one, I know a lot of folks here drive one, the EVs are pretty awesome vehicles. Quiet, smooth, powerful. The manufacturers are coming a long way every day to make the range longer. I know it's not for everyone everywhere. There's some also hybrid plug-in approaches that gets kind of the job done. You get 40, 50 miles to them, and then you can get on your gas-fired machine after that. Sorry, not machine, vehicle. Going to but we also offer, we want to see the infrastructure build in the state of Vermont, because one thing we always hear is is the grid ready for it? Yes, it is. We've been planning for it. We're continuing to plan for it. If every single electric vehicle and every person in Vermont showed up right now in this one day, probably not. But as we're seeing the curve go up, we're planning for it, and yes, we'll have the capacity for it. And is the infrastructure getting better? Yes, it is. So folks have a big deal about charging, and we just talked about the home charging. We think is definitely the ticket. But what else is out there if you're taking a longer drive for fast chargers across the state, or even just public-facing chargers? I think you said there's one here at the library. Is there?
Oh, the library has some e-bikes for rent.
E-bikes, I'm sorry. Yeah. But like, we would probably think this would be a great spot for a public-facing level 2 charger, and we offer incentives to make that happen for a level 2, or even in different places a fast charger across the state. And we're trying to help fill in those gaps with various other federal programs that are now hitting the road pretty hot and heavy right now, getting that infrastructure across the state and actually across the country to make it happen.
What's the equivalent, Zach? Like $1.50 a gallon?
Yeah, it's $1.50 a gallon. I think that's the
Less?
big piece of it.
Jen says less.
Less,
I'm gonna
maybe
go with
$1.30.
Jen.
Whatever dollar a gallon.
$1.20 at home.
Yeah, the payback for that is pretty. It's in a couple of years. The payback of the cost of the EV, you're breaking even within 18 to 24 months, and depending on what model, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And reduce maintenance costs as well.
Yes,
right?
yeah, thank
Having
you.
to do the oil changes and cooling systems and all the pieces that are necessary for a gasoline powered engine, they just go away with electric vehicles. So that's why I love mine.
Yeah, they go. And the biggest piece of it, and I love more than all that, is I'm not emitting anything out of the tailpipe. I really do believe in that the carbon emissions from it is causing a lot of problems, and you see what's going on in Florida right now because of the hot Gulf temperatures heating up, and there's a hurricane, biggest one they've seen hit Florida in a long time.
I was going to move from, we talked a lot about solar, we moved into electric vehicles, and I want to kind of cap off our question and answer period here before we move to any questions in the room. To cap it all off, and I'd ask each of you the same question. What else should folks be thinking about in general to reduce fossil fuel use and save money? We've been through a lot, a summation of how you feel, what you feel folks should be exploring, but if there's anything that we hadn't touched on tonight, Zach, we'll start with you, and we'll move right. What are some other things that folks should be interested in and looking at to reduce fossil fuel usage and save money?
I think we've kind of said it. Start simple, right? Like maybe it's your lawnmower, maybe it's your hedge trimmer. I've been in the electric vehicle market for almost like 3 years now, and then this year I finally got one, and it's great. But it took me a while to make the jump. But anything that you can think of, that's on fossil fuel, there's probably a technology that is electrified or a hybrid model, something that would work both ways. So yeah, start small. There's there's snow machines. We're a big snow machining state. There's some snow machines out there. I don't know if they're all loved by everyone, but they could fit the purpose.
We need snow.
We need some snow, and that's the hard part, right?
Paul.
Yeah, I similar to Zach, I think it's looking for those opportunities. Look, it's not just our home or our car, but there's lots of devices we have that are internal combustion, and where can you make that leap? And I say it a lot, but and especially with the offers right now, if you heat your domestic hot water in your home with oil or gas, I consider a heat pump water heater. There's rebates for everybody, and then there's the additional up to 100% for income eligible. To me, it's a no-brainer, and there's rarely a basement in New England that isn't damp, and now will be dry. So it's a win-win. So that's my pitch.
Yeah, I think we've touched upon all of the major technologies that I can think of here, and just maybe reinforcing the point that you have 3 organizations here, as well as others that we work on behalf and partner with to try to help support homeowners and Vermont families in their journey. We're trying to figure out where you're at, where do you want to go, and then some of those incremental steps so that you can develop that plan for the near term as well as for the long term. So we're very lucky to have organizations that work so closely
Agreed.
together in this space.
Yeah.
comparing notes, being able to make customer referrals if our organization can't help for whatever reason, being able to hand off to Efficiency Vermont or Green Mountain Power. And our goals are ultimately the same, looking to help customers reduce their energy costs, reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and
Save some money.
save some money and be more comfortable in their homes. So,
If you work with one of us, you work with all of us. So we're not going to we're not going to do this to you. We're going to make sure that, GMP or VGS's offers are woven in if you call Efficiency Vermont and vice
Same.
versa.
Yep.
So it's about 7, a little 25 after. I wanted to move from these written questions, and thank you so much to everybody who had prepared the written questions. I wanted to open up the room with a show of hands. If you do have a question, raise your hand, and we'll direct you to the panel. So are there any questions from the room? Mary, you have a question.
I have a couple. This is an Energy Committee question, a couple of Energy Committee questions. Tim, I want to press you a little bit on Vermont gas and geothermal, and something could be coming. What are we looking at? What's the first areas? You mentioned having core users and the kind of the logic of these systems, but okay, so City of St. Albans, 7,000 people, a couple big industrial or institutional sites. What could we be looking at here? We have, by the way, we're very proud that there's senior housing going up that has its own geothermal system.
I heard that. That's great.
So, can you tell us some more? So, people here who really want to get rid of fossil fuels, they really, really, really want to. Do they need to wait 20 years, or what do you think?
Well, I'll say that we're still trying to figure some of this out. So
Okay.
a lot of our focus is on new construction, particularly affordable housing that has some level of commercial space as well. With those types of projects, you can design for geothermal, the lower temperature systems, the emitters that is required, as well as have enough load diversity so that instead of needing to drill 10 wells, maybe you can get away with 7 or 8 because the system is well designed. And we actually know what the heating and the cooling loads will be because an engineer has taken a look at it. Geothermal is definitely more challenging to retrofit into existing buildings. So we're starting to explore, these pilot projects with new affordable housing, figuring out how to make the tax credits work since there's some strange things that were written into the IRS rules that we're still trying to figure out, and be able to demonstrate a model that can be replicated and taken elsewhere. So I wouldn't say that it's a program that we're going to be able to deliver 2 years from now, but really based on what we learned from the first set of projects and build out members of our team, build out those partner networks, figure out how to make the financials work, how to get geothermal into a variety of different homes and businesses, whether they're a forced hot air system or hydronic system, a little bit easier, a little bit harder. It is going to take some time.
Any other questions from the room?
See another one.
Yeah.
Oh, Jenna, you have a question.
Okay, so you were saying that a homeowner should have an energy audit and weatherize. Those are like 2 different things. And I'm kind of wondering if they're both necessary or if a homeowner could weatherize and that's kind of encompasses an energy audit.
Yeah, good question. So there's a couple different layers. There's the virtual home energy visit that I mentioned, which I think is just a great starting point to get a lay of the land. Talk with one of our advisors who's not doing this for a living, that's not going to weatherize, just to see where your home's at, very high level. And then there's doing that energy audit, which is going to be much more detailed. They're going to do a lot of things to assess the air leakage within that home, how robust it is in terms of insulation and air sealing. That's going to cost a fee. Some of the folks that do that only, they stand alone as just auditors. Some of them also do the weatherization work. And some will forego that fee if you then hire them to do the weatherization. But really what that audit will do is inform you and inform them of what needs to be improved within the home. Because as we were noting, the variety of homes out there, their age, their condition vary widely. So where do you need to make those improvements? Will be different home by home, so that's going to lay it out. And it will also give you an indication of what sort of savings do you think you can obtain And there may even be some options within that audit of like, you could do everything on this list and here's how much it's gonna cost.
Right.
Or you could do these pieces of it and it's gonna cost you less. And you may determine as that homeowner, you know what, I'd love to do 100%, but I'm gonna do 80% of the recommendations because that's gonna get me, most of the way there. A lot of times there's a few things that really are gonna be the lion's share of the savings. So you can make those choices. It's allowing you and as well as the person that's gonna do the remediation to go in informed.
I did just that in my house. I had the audit done. They came in, gave a report. I looked at the report and said, these are the high level best bang for the bucks that we can do. I researched through different methods, through a lot of it, how to do it, and I took my time to go in and actually did it myself. But each, 1 year might have been the attic insulation and weather sealing around the whole thing, and then actually that same year was the sill plate around the thing. And understanding, okay, there's windows that have to go next. Here's our door that probably is not insulated and it was from 1985. I knew it. But I did what I could do the first year, and then the next year I went and tacked like that plan we keep talking about, the next couple of things. But using that audit from that service that's provided, I was able to do a lot of it myself and be complete with the project in a couple of years.
Yeah, well, it's generally recommended for somebody that's purchasing a new home to go through a home inspection process just to understand like what's the current condition, where there's some things that you're going to need to address right away, where are some things that may not be up to prevailing codes. So an energy audit basically gives you an inventory of current energy use, what are some near-term needs, what are some mid-term or long-term project plans, and then the resources that are out there to help support you, whether it's weatherizing, upgrading your equipment, or going over to heat pumps.
Right.
One thing I would just add to that is you're mapping that out once you get the list of things. If you just pick like the low-hanging fruit or those measures that are going to give you the greatest savings, it's always a balance. Like there are some things you may want to do later, but some things, if you don't bundle them with those more attractive improvements, they may never get done. So it's you taking a look at your financial situation. What are these costs? What do I gain what will I gain out of these improvements? And making that judgment call of like, geez, well, this one has some moderate savings, but if I don't do it with this one that offers me the most savings, I may never get to it. So what do you want to bundle? What can be done later?
Any other hands from around the room with questions? We'll go to Jim. Jim, you have a question.
So I've been thinking quite a bit about battery systems. We did one in the Barlow School. It's a Head Start school, and it's just that we had an opportunity to do that. We got our feet wet with that project, but I'm now trying to think differently about it. I have a friend who has a big solar array just south of the city, south of the industrial park, and he's got a big battery array there. And that's worked out very well for him because coupled with his big solar array that he's got 3+ acres. But are there other kinds of battery installation sites and services that we should be thinking about? The one that popped into my mind a couple of months ago was a friend of mine has a sawmill, and in order to upgrade his sawmill to a more powerful system and all that, he had to do a major, very expensive upgrade to 3-phase power and all of that. It was just really large amount of money, and it occurred to me that if he had a battery system there, he might have been able to sort of trickle charge that battery system, and he could also take that to charge a battery array, generate 3-phase power, and he could also charge up and also feed it back to the grid, on a trickle basis. Just as one example of trying to think of different ways to think about
Absolutely.
This kind of thing.
I think one thing that we see batteries also used for in that commercial space, specifically what you're talking about, is like almost arbitraging your load. So in a larger commercial load, back to our, our peaks that we're trying to shave off, can you curtail some of your load and get a better rate for that? If you can curtail your load, we compensate you by giving a better rate. And a battery, if you put it behind the meter, allows you to arbitrage between the grid load and the battery load and essentially curtail that load when we call for it. So you get a better rate from GMP to do so. And then, even at times when we're not calling for it, can you just use the battery to run your operations? And I think that's what you're getting at there. Or, you're also deferring larger 3-phase upgrade costs by a battery, I guess.
Right, that was part of the idea.
Yeah, and I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's how we see it, as almost being arbitrage, using it as an asset to use it as energy that you're storing right there. And that can go a long way with a lot of different types of operations, or heck, we're seeing them in those fast EV chargers now coming to the market. That's the same idea, right? You're using a single phase AC, charging the battery and flipping it in an inverter and charging at DC at high capacity. We're going to see probably some of that here in the very short future in Vermont, I'm sure, in those EV chargers. But that's the stuff that they're definitely looking at. And the battery market is maturing. The batteries are getting slightly less expensive every year. There's more of them. There's more manufacturers. Folks are, using them in different ways they haven't in the past. So I think you're going to see a lot of different opportunities in the future to do all sorts of different things with them like that.
At this point, is there an information source to be tracking or to be contacting to try to, figure it out and, be a leader in that effort?
Was there a contact you said?
Any kind of contact? Are there people who would advise on this kind of thing, saying, check with, this class of vendor, this class of manufacturer?
We can give you recommendations for that for sure. We have a few resources that we know of. Again, the market, every day I see someone coming to market for another product or another battery. So they're definitely out there. It's like, what function are we trying to fill with? And we can help you point in that direction for sure.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Mary, you had a question.
I just, another battery question. Zach, you mostly answered this, but I just kind of went by a little quick, so
Okay.
I wanted to ask you to reiterate. So one of the big extreme weather risks in St. Albans City is wind.
Yeah.
And people who read the news and read about extreme weather may be tempted to run out and buy a generator.
Mm-hmm.
But they could run out and buy some batteries. And I wanted to, just ordinary homeowner, how does that make sense? Step by step, what do? They just call you and say help? Or
yeah, that's the easiest part. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, we can compare what the need for that battery or what that generation is, right? So the wind is one of them. Unless you're talking about a really large load in a commercial space, that's, it can get quite expensive. And those batteries, I just said they're coming down in price, but they are still quite expensive. Residential spaces definitely means to do so, purchasing them on their own or you leasing them from Green Mountain Power, I think is the simplest, easiest way to do it. And you're paying this off in a 10-year lease, 10-year term, $55 a month. If someone wants to participate in that, and you choose the vendor that you would want to, we have different vendors in a qualified list that installs them for us, and you go through the steps to pick your vendor. The vendor will tell you when they're available to install the battery. They'll assess your home and situation, make sure there's a fit for it, and we're installing them within a couple months this year. That's probably the easiest play for us. You can go to our website. There's a really great link on there for home battery storage.
Are there places where it's really clear that this just doesn't make sense, or
There might be some homes where it just doesn't make sense, where there's not space for one, or but typically I think we've having a really good success rate of finding places to put the batteries, and having our contractors install them, and for reasonable, for what that technology is in a reasonable way. They're a great product. I don't know if you guys have one. Do you guys have one? No. In some cases, you live kind of close to maybe not St. Albans, but closer to Chittenden County, where the reliability for the electric grid's really pretty awesome. It's pretty great. Maybe you're like, I don't know if I need this. But if we're seeing the reliability in parts of St. Albans and Fairfax, further out, towards Cambridge and places like that, where it might make more sense. You're further from the downtown city center, and further from a substation specifically.
Well, we heard the Climate and Energy Committee's speaker last spring was somebody from the National Weather Service. And he was saying, it's not impossible that you guys would get a derecho, which is a big linear windstorm, that if it came, it would probably follow the lake, the line of the lake. It could sweep the whole Champlain Valley. So this is kind of worst case scenario, but
Yeah.
you could have power outages all the way up and down Champlain Valley. So
Yeah.
the city might not be at the top of the list for the people to come in and repair the lines. So I'm just trying to think about, one of our charges is to try to help people be ready for whatever extreme weather is gonna bring us.
Yeah.
And if we're looking at power outages for a week because people are working as fast as they can, and your turn is your turn.
On that note, we see these weather events happen. They're stronger. They happen more frequent.
Yeah.
We see it because we deal with it every all year long, and so we're trying to invest in our infrastructure so it's more hardened for these storms that are now hitting us.
What does that mean?
So in places where the infrastructure it's old. It's maybe in the off-road, it's not near the road. It's been there since 1970, it's been there since 1980 in the off-road corridor, where it was nothing but a farm field 40 years ago. Now it's wooded and grows in constantly. Moving that from that farm field, or now in the woods, essentially out into the infrastructure along the road. The wire used to be, in those days, used to be bare. You would get a tree limb on it, or it would cause a fault. Now everything's very well covered with some insulation. Putting in different protection, so if a fault does happen in one section of the line, there's basically a fuse that opens up, or some sort of protective device that opens up, so not the whole line goes out. High speed clearing, that's what we're calling it. So everything kind of communicates to each other, and we think power walls is a great way to help with that, or batteries in folks' house to allow for us time to come out and pick up the infrastructure. We're also undergrounding sections. We're seeing that also in the past, the undergrounding was a lot more expensive in places, and just you have the civil work and also the material that we use in it, but the civil work kind of used to double in price. We're seeing these things coming closer together, and eliminating the need for tree trimming for another 25, 30 years. It actually makes sense to underground things. So in some cases, we're going to try to underground things to make sure, if it's underground, the trees aren't going to hit it, right? You don't have to trim the trees, so it makes it a lot more reliable. Those are the things that we're looking at to, help our infrastructure across the state and eliminate the need for storm restoration as much as we can, and so you don't have these outages. That's one of our goals.
I was going to take one more question, getting close to 8, and then we can move into more of a social, informal question and answer process. But we have one more question here.
Did you write all the questions, Mary?
So, I I had the question earlier about pre-tax versus adjusted gross income for your
Yeah.
low and moderate income. But even without having that answer here, there are a lot of folks who are just above it, you know? They really don't quite qualify, but that doesn't mean they're ready to lay out, you know, $50,000 to do a bunch of work on their house. So, for those folks, it's kind of like, is there a formula or a rule of thumb or some way of thinking, okay, this particular fix is gonna be expensive, but here's the payback, here's what it's going to get me. A lot of contractors won't do that kind of math. They're not engineers, they're just people who do the hands-on work. Is there a way to sort of figure that out?
When you're getting an audit done by a professional and you're working with somebody that does this, they will do estimates
They will.
for you. Yes, and again, if you couple that with incentives that are available, even for those that don't meet the lower moderate income, which
Okay.
covers a lot of folks, there's still rebates available. And if you finance that on top of it, and then again, you can make those choices. Like when we were talking about, you know, you've got a suite of things in front of you. Which ones do I want to do? What meets my economic thresholds? And you can weigh those choices. So I think the financing with the foresight through some analysis by a trained professional
Okay.
does allow you to come at it at a level that you can do financially and gets the results that you're hoping for.
So
Anything
finally,
you'd
I
add to
would just
that,
ask
Tim?
you
No,
to
you know that.
reiterate your companies, the contact, go to the website, here's what you're gonna find, or call us, here's what you're gonna get. Can you just, for the TV audience and anyone here who's kind of lost track of what it is who they're supposed to call or what they're gonna ask?
Yeah, so for Vermont Gas customers, I would encourage everybody to check out vgsvt.com/efficiency. And I actually have a series of other web links for some of the other programs that we've talked about with the switch and save and some of the rebates and weatherization. But efficiency will get you there, and then you can find kind of what your adventure looks like from there.
If I could just add, if you are a Vermont VGS customer and you're looking to reduce your gas use, contact VGS. If it's electrical, or if you're not a VGS customer, it's good to start with us, and we're sort of that tip of the spear that will take you in whether it's Green Mountain Power, Vermont Electric Co-op, or one of the smaller municipalities, we can help there as well. So that would be
Good
the only
clarification,
distinction.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
like I'm looking to weatherize and I'm a VGS customer, call VGS. I want to weatherize and I'm not a VGS customer, start with us.
Yep, the easiest way to look at information is greenmountainpower.com, all spelled out. And then on that page is lots of different links to rates and rebates. The tab is where I would go if I was a customer. Say that again, rates and rebates. There's a lot of information on there. And then you can reach out to us at Energy Innovation Team at greenmountainpower.com. Actually, sorry, it's not team. Energy Innovation at greenmountainpower.com. And then we actually can provide Zach and you, Mary, with some of our contacts, phones, the three of us here, that we kind of like, we would grab some information and give it to the correct teammates that we help manage on all of our organizations. So kind of like Paul said, kind of the spearheads for different things and allowing folks to give you that information you need.
Terrific. Hey, Zach, Paul, Tim, thank you so much for being here, answering
Thank
these
you.
questions. Thanks to Northwest Access TV for recording the program, and thanks to the St. Albans Library for providing the space. This event was organized in big part by Mary and the St. Albans City Climate and Energy Committee. And just thank everybody for coming out, and remind everyone to sign in on the sign-up sheet for some prize drawings later. Definitely get in on that and have some of the rest of the pizza and drinks and help us out. So thank you so much, everybody, and just a round of applause for appreciation for everybody. And yeah, we'll just be breaking down, put some things.